My new book, Facts That Aren't True, is out now. Don't forget about my other book, Rational Answers to Stupid Questions. Click the link in the description now.
The idea of actualization, so let's start with potency. You have the potency to move, 1 inch to the right or to the left in your chair. Like that's a potential that you have. In order to actualize that potential, you actually have to, lift yourself up and move yourself. So potency is the potential to do something, whereas actualization is the actual, I guess you could say, impact of the potential. You actually doing the potential, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we can agree that in order for something to change, in other words, like your position in the chair to change, you have to have the potential to do it, as well as it actually has to happen.
Sure.
And so that means that this actualization of potential is actually real in the world. That should be without explanation, but would you agree with that?
Say that very last part again, sorry.
It's just a combination of like the first part and then the last half we were talking about, that the actual actualization of potential is a real feature of the world. Would you agree with that?
The actualization feature is a real feature of the world. I mean, it's something that happens, I guess. I wouldn't call it a property of matter necessarily, but
Yeah, so and this will get into like the principle of causality. Are you familiar with that?
cause and effect.
Yeah, like something can't be like in our the language I was just using, like a potential can't be actualized unless it's something already actual has actualized it. Like something that's not real cannot change something that is real, in other words.
That makes sense. Something that's like saying something that doesn't exist can't interact with things that do exist.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Again, sorry, some of these are going to be super dumb, but like when you discuss big questions like this, I think it's important to go step by step. Um, so this anything that we change in the world, you'd agree, is thus happens from something that is already real. And this would mean that any occurrence, any time that, say, object X changes or whatever, that means that there's a substance Y or another object Y or whatever, which does the changing. Would you agree with that?
Seems to be the way things work.
Okay, great. Um, where do we want to go from this? So, if you then take the existence of that Y, which does the changing of the object X,
Yep.
that means that there has to be something that supports Y's existence. In other words, like so, for your chair to exist, for example, in the position that it's in, there has to be a floor. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I feel like we're just getting to the first mover eventually.
Yeah, that is where we're getting. Do you just want to skip to there?
Kind of. So yeah, I went over this in I made a response video to that top 10 arguments for God or whatever, because yeah, I feel like this is special pleading because the argument goes like God is pure act. And so
Mhm.
when anything acts, it actualizes its potential. Is that accurate?
Of course.
But when God acts, which we know God acts, no potential is realized.
No, well, okay, so let me clarify. So you are referring to, I believe we'd call horizontal actualization, whereas I'm referring to vertical actualization. That's just a jargon we can just disregard. But basically, it's not the argument that God creates this, which then creates this, which then creates this, but it's rather that God is the concurrent supporter of all things in the universe. So your chair can be where it is right now because of the floor, and the floor can be where it is right now because of the earth or because of your house or whatever. But what supports the earth? Well, eventually you get to a point where you're at God. So it's concurrent actualization and not this horizontal or vertical actualization, I should say. And that
So
gets rid of the special pleading fallacy.
why would that get rid of the special pleading fallacy?
Because so especially the special pleading fallacy, if I'm understanding the way you're using it, because there's a couple different ways you can use it when it comes to God. When you're referring to the special pleading fallacy, are you referring to God being able to actualize without God itself or himself or herself or whatever being actualized.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, so then maybe we need to take a few extra logical steps to see. Maybe I'm skipping just way too far ahead here. Because in order for anything to be actual in the universe, which we've agreed that there are, actual things in the universe, I'm sure. In order for anything to be actual in the universe, there has to be something that is supporting its potential.
Sure.
It
So
has to be.
I wanted to ask this earlier, and I think this is probably a better direction to go.
Okay.
Why can't I just say that the universe is that thing, which grounds? Because we would just define the universe as everything that exists.
Sure, that's just applying a different name to something, though. I'm okay if we want to rechange God to universe, like with a capital U or whatever.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say. Well, I'm not making like a argument for like Spinoza's God or anything like that. I mean, I'm rejecting any God concept. It's just
Okay.
why do I need to assume that a supernatural, non-physical causation is even required? Why can't we just say the universe is all that exists? And
Because then you're saying, sorry, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt.
the only other thing I was going to add is we also don't have access to any information about cause and effect in the first like few Planck seconds of our universe, and I don't see why it would be the case that some as of yet undiscovered quirk of physics or grand unifying theory or whatever, or just simply the concept of time, which would play into our concept of cause and effect, is very, very different in those instances. So, like, we're demanding that it make good intuitive sense to us, and we exist in a very mundane sort of existence, considering what kinds of things do happen in the universe or have happened in the universe, and like the demand that all of this conform to that, I think is just a little too. You're trying to put it in a like you're demanding that it makes sense, and I get the urge for that, but I don't think that skews it. Just because we can imagine something that is fairly simple to explain and does well to satisfy the sort of the itch we have, or the god-shaped hole in our like whatever existence universe or whatever, just because we have something that's nice and digestible that fits there, I don't think that actually gives credence to the idea being true in any way.
Oh no, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. Just because, an idea is simple to explain doesn't mean it's true. And I actually don't think that this whole, what we're referring to, non-physical causality, or what I refer to as God, I don't think that's a simple question to explain either. So I'm you're using science term. I think you use like the plankton. I can't say that I'm familiar with that stuff. I know you're a scientist. I can't say I'm familiar with that stuff. So some of that stuff you might need to explain to me. Um,
Well, like, do you
but
agree that the Big Bang happened?
I I'll agree with the general scientific consensus. Sure, I can't honestly say I have an opinion on it because I couldn't even tell you what the Big Bang is in all
That's
reality.
that's fine, but so the problem is, much like inside of the event horizon of a black hole, in the first like Planck second of the universe, our laws of physics break down and can't explain what's going on. So like if somebody told you that heaven is inside of black holes because science can't explain what's going on within them, I think we would be like, that's not a good argument that therefore heaven exists inside of black holes. It's absolutely possible.
Yeah.
And we have something that explains a very deep mystery in our universe, but I don't think it's a good explanation. And so these I think that the frontier of like what we don't know in science is a god-shaped hole, I think. And so this is just an example of people putting that peg there, but I don't think, for the same reason, I don't think that that's a reasonable like justification, is pretty much what I'm saying.
Okay. So I guess I really don't. Not that it's something that should be disregarded, but I guess I don't really totally need to understand the whole plankton theory, whatever, how that all works. But basically, you're saying we don't understand what happened, like in the smallest unit of time conceivable when the universe was created.
Yeah, and I think that this whole what we're talking about here basically is a God of the gaps argument, and I think that's sort of like a case you can make for why we can put God in this instance, why God fits there, because we can't explain that. You know, causality and whatever it breaks down, and where the hell did the universe come from, and all that other stuff in the first place. And my general response to these things is like, we don't know if the universe came from anywhere. It might be completely
Mm.
uncaused, uncreated, or whatever. We don't know, and so we don't need an unactualized actualizer or a something with no potential or anything like that.
So let's say we have some like the concept of a plankton. Like obviously, a plankton isn't something that I can like grab and throw like a football or whatever. But in order for a plankton unit of time, if I'm understanding what it is correctly, in order for that to exist, there has to be something that actualizes its existence.
Yeah, and it may just be
So,
the universe.
but that gets us back to the God question, because then we can just substitute the universe for God. I'm okay with doing that.
When you're
But now
adding,
we can ascribe
you're
all these.
adding a
Go
layer
ahead.
of you're adding something else to it. You're saying that there was a point where there was not a universe and a God that I don't know on what grounds we're even claiming that this God can exist. We just have to admit by stupefaction that there must be something, and it has no discernible properties or anything. But it then made a universe begin to exist. And I'm saying, why not just think that a universe existed and through virtual particles interacting initiated a Big Bang state within itself or whatever? So I just don't get why we need to add another thing to this.
Um, so I would disagree that we can't ascribe particular attributes, as you were saying, to this universe or God, and I'd be happy to do that. Maybe that's the more effective way for me to present my argument here. To rather instead of arguing that we have a purely actual actualizer, just to go down the route of like a immaterial, immutable, eternal, like incorporeal type being, and then from those maybe go into an actualizer, if that would be more useful. And again, if you have to kick me out because this is taking too long, just I
It
can go nerd
probably
on this
wouldn't
stuff.
be useful because I'm just going to tell you that that is the very definition of something that does not exist. Something that does not exist exists nowhere, is made of nothing, and never has existed, so exists no when. A spaceless, timeless, immaterial God is the exact same thing as something that does not exist. But we're just claiming that this God exists, and we use like qualitative descriptors for it. It's eternal
Mm.
and it's has all these omni characters, and it's God is love and whatever else. And it's like, okay, well, now we're talking about like it's almost like we're having a platonic discussion of, does roundness exist? And that's just you're speaking a different language than me at that point, and we're not gonna be able to agree on something like that. So I think that
Mhm.
it kind of renders the argument to be incoherent because you're trying to describe to me something that has no discernible characteristics exists. It has the exact same properties as something that does not exist.